Hello everyone and welcome back to our reading of Atlantis. Today's chapter, The Legacy of Atlantis. The Atlantis controversy does not end with the disappearance of Atlantis into the ocean. The island nation, if it existed, was swallowed up with most of its inhabitants, but some Atlanteans may have fled and taken their culture, inventions, and knowledge to many parts of the world. As we have seen, many countries and cultures have strong similarities in some of their legends and place names. There are also many cultural similarities. To some, these are the most convincing evidence of all that Atlantis was a real place. Archaeologists and anthropologists disagree about how culture and civilization spread throughout the world. Were inventions such as the wheel, writing, calendars, and so on developed independently in various parts of the world? Or were they developed in one place and spread through trade and travel? There is growing evidence that there was contact across the Atlantic Ocean before 4000 BC. There is also evidence that, according to some interpretations, may be proof that the Atlanteans migrated to Egypt and the Americas. For example, cultures on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean share common traits. They also share similar architectural remains. Pyramids, obelisks, and stelae are prevalent in both places. Could Atlantean travelers and later Atlantean survivors and their descendants have brought the advanced knowledge of Atlantis to the Americas and to Egypt? Author Brad Steiger writes about the supernatural and the unexplained mysteries of the world. He says that the culture of Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, and that of Egypt had many similarities. Tiahuanaco's house of worship is almost a scale model of Egypt's Temple of Karnak. The stones are fitted, joined, and polished in the same manner. Don't forget also that explorer David Zink remarked on the tight fit of the stones in the underwater ruins of Bimini. Did master builders from a common culture construct these buildings, or did they teach others how to build these great monuments? In the Andes Mountains in Bolivia, 13,000 feet above sea level, is the ancient city of Tiahuanaco. It lies in ruins. Only its huge walls and statues remain. Perhaps this is evidence of an ancient and alien race. Those who accept the existence of Atlantis believed it is the oldest city in the world, and that it was actually a part of the island of Atlantis. In the language of the ancient Incas, Tiahuanaco means seat of the mighty ancients. When the Spaniards reached this city in the 1500s, it had already been long abandoned. Even the oldest living Incans did not know who had built the city. According to their legend, Tiahuanaco was built by giant gods when the mountains were helms and the deserts were green. Who were these giant gods? Were they from Atlantis? The legend is puzzling, because geologists have said that it is impossible that the city could have been built when the mountains were helms. It would take at least hundreds of thousands of years for the mountains to be made. Yet there is some evidence that the city may have been built before the Andes reached their present height. Could they have risen thousands of feet in a short time? Lake Titicaca, the largest lake in South America, is 10 miles from Tiahuanaco. It is known as the wash basin of the gods. in the middle of this vast lake is Sun Island. The ruins of a stone temple remain there. The city of Tiahuanaco may have been a port on the lake thousands of years ago. According to archaeologist Arthur Poznański, Tiahuanaco was a thriving seaport in 14,000 BC. Poznański became devoted to this ancient city and spent 30 years studying it. He concluded that the Sun Temple was a clock based on the movement of the stars. According to studies done at Potsdam University, it was oriented to a star that was the Pole Star in 9550 BC. But the temple was never finished. It was suddenly and unexplainedly abandoned. Underwater explorer Jacques Cousteau has discovered a wall of gigantic stones and evidence of large canals on the bottom of Lake Titicaca. Remember, there were also giant stone ruins in the waters off Bimini. Fossils of saltwater creatures were also found in the lake, and fossilized seawater plants were discovered in the surrounding mountains. This may mean that Tiahuanaco and Titicaca were once at sea level, possibly part of a sea gulf. The mountains of Antarctica are part of the same range as the Andes. Was it the Atlanteans living in Tiahuanaco who mapped the Antarctic before it froze over? According to some theories about Atlantis, records and ruins of an Atlantean civilization are buried beneath the ice of Antarctica. The Mayans. In the late 1800s, the attention of Atlantis seekers focused on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala. Hidden deep within the jungles were the remains of the once mighty Mayan Empire. The age of the ruins has been estimated at between 2,000 and 4,500 years old. The estimates are based on current belief about the development of civilization and on carbon dating of objects found in and near the large stone structures. Carbon dating involves measuring the radioactivity of the carbon atoms in an object. The radioactivity decreases at a specific rate, so the amount that is left can tell the approximate age of the object. Unfortunately, the stone structures, which do not contain carbon, do not respond to carbon dating methods. Some people suggest that the ruins are much older than 4,000 years and could have belonged to a very old culture, perhaps Atlantis. The Mayans, or perhaps other cultures before them, left thousands of pyramids and stelae. The Sun Pyramid at Teotihuacan, Mexico, was used to mark the sun's seasonal positions. The Great Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt also marked these solar positions, as did the Temple of Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. The stelae in Guatemala were used to measure the size of the Earth and to map the planet. The obelisks of Egypt were also used for this purpose. John Mitchell, author of The New View over Atlantis, wrote that the Mayan Sun Pyramid and the Great Pyramid of Cheops were part of a worldwide power system laid out across the globe by an ancient people. He believes that the system tapped the strong magnetic power of the Earth. Who set up the system? Could it have been the migrating Atlanteans? The Mayan Empire became a popular area for explorers during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Between 1910 and 1930, engineer William Niven claim to have found ancient ruins of whole prehistoric cities at a depth of 30 feet near Mexico City. Because of the layers of boulders and sand and pebbles, it seemed to Niven that the buildings had been struck by a series of tidal waves. Because of their depth, he estimated that the ruins were about 50,000 years old. Many other Mayan and other ancient sites were explored. They included the city of Teotihuacan, also near Mexico City, a 230-foot-high pyramid at Tikal in Guatemala, and the city of Chichen Itza in the northern Yucatan. Mayan ruins. Most of the Mayan ruins remain covered, overgrown, or ignored, but we do know that their buildings and sculptures all reflect an obsession with time. Everything the Mayans built has reference to time in relation to their own civilization. C.W. Serum, in his book Gods, Graves, and Scholars, writes, "Every Mayan construction was part of a great calendar in stone. There was no such thing as random arrangement. The Mayan aesthetic had a mathematical basis." The Mayans had a very accurate calendar. They calculated the year at 365,24,219 days. By our modern techniques, the year has been calculated at 242,127 days. The Mayans also invented the concept of and symbol for zero. The Mayans' knowledge of the stars and the universe was vast. Augustus Laplangian, a medical doctor and explorer in the 1800s, concluded from his investigation of Mayan ruins that the Mayans were expert mathematicians, astronomers, and navigators. He believed that they were able to compute the size of the world and the distance from the North Pole to the South Pole. He also believed that the Mayans, like the Egyptians, built their religious ideas and their beliefs about the universe into their architecture, especially their pyramids. Was it merely coincidence that several of the ancient cultures developed sophisticated mathematical concepts at about the same time? The Mayans are a mystery. Most of their writings, their history, and the key to their hieroglyphics were burned in the 1500s by the Catholic missionaries. They wished to wipe out all traces of the pagan religion. But two important documents have survived, the Chilam Balam and the Popol Vuh. Both tell of a great flood and massive destruction. They also tell of a people coming to the Yucatan from the east. Those who believe in the existence of Atlantis speculate that the Mayans were the descendants of the Atlanteans, and that their knowledge of astronomy and mathematics was part of their ancient legacy from Atlantis. Egypt. Egypt may also have been heavily influenced by Atlantean culture before the destruction of Atlantis. Consider, for instance, the Great Pyramid of Cheops. It is one of the 7 wonders of the world. It is a monument to the genius of the Egyptians in both mathematics and the measurement and study of the stars. How did the Egyptians come by this great knowledge in ancient days? Is it a coincidence that the peoples of the Americas also used their buildings for the purpose of astronomy and mathematics? Or did the Atlanteans teach both peoples? The Great Pyramid is a mathematical marvel. According to some authorities, every measurement on the Great Pyramid is significant. The structure incorporates the value of pi to a precise degree. The sum of the lengths of its base sides is equal to the number of days in a year. The estimated rate of the Earth can be derived by multiplying the height of the pyramid by 1 billion, and the estimated distance from the Earth to the Sun can be calculated by multiplying the height of the pyramid by 10 billion. The measurements of the sides also reflect a knowledge of latitude and longitude. These concepts had supposedly not been invented when the pyramid was built. The Great Pyramid is also closely aligned with the North Pole, and some scientists claim that flowing through the pyramid is a mysterious energy that does not fit our laws of science. Was this structure built by the genius of Atlantis? Did the Atlanteans flee to Egypt as Edgar Cayce claimed? Egyptian civilization. Egypt seemed to pass from a relatively primitive period into a well-organized kingdom very suddenly. Most historians date that change at between 4000 and 3000 BC, yet some traditions date the Great Pyramid to before the Flood, although many authorities do not agree with this. There is some evidence to support it. Shells and fossils and a salt deposit have been found near this structure. Since the pyramid sits in the midst of a great desert, this seems hardly unusual. According to Charles Berlitz, cultures with irrigation and pyramids developed geographically along a fairly straight line at about 30 degrees north latitude. Central America, North Africa, Egypt, the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, Iran, and India all lie along this line. If we see this path beginning in Central America and traveling east through these regions to India, there is a noticeable break at the Atlantic Ocean. Perhaps there was once another land there. There are few similarities, the critics say. Not everyone agrees with those who claim there are similarities between Egypt and the Americas. For example, Elsbreg de Camp, author of Lost Continents, lists the many items that Egypt and other Old World cultures had that the Mayans of the New World lacked. He asks how two civilizations founded by the same motherland could be so different. The Mayans lacked the plow and the wheel. Although they had some food plants in common, the staples of the Egyptians was wheat, while the staple of the Mayans was maize. Their calendars were also very different, de Camp says. The Egyptian calendar was based on a year of 12 months, having 28 days each. The Mayan calendar, on the other hand, was based on a year of 18 months, having 20 days each. But both built an adjustment for leap years into their calendars. As for the hieroglyphics found in Egypt and America, de Camp says that only the principle is the same. There is no resemblance between the language or the symbols. Megaliths and Atlantis. Megaliths are giant building stones most commonly found in countries bordering the Atlantic Ocean. Their builders, dates of origin, and purpose are undetermined. Students of Atlantis speculate about the megaliths' relationship to Atlantis. Megalithic ruins can be simple stone monuments or large constructions having many of these great stones. Probably the most famous megalithic ruins is Stonehenge in England. In Mexico and Honduras, the Mayan ruins are often considered megalithic. Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, is a city of giant stones. In Egypt, the pyramids might be considered megalithic structures too. There is even a megalithic site in New Hampshire called Mystery Hill. The great mounds built by certain Native American tribes, especially along the Mississippi Valley, are also considered megalithic. Archaeologists Mason Valentine and explorer David Zink claim that the ruins in the waters off Bimini are megalithic. The Bimini ruins, like others in South and Central America, show great mastery of stoneworking. The blocks fit so tightly that even a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. John Mitchell, author of The New View over Atlantis, suggests that the megalith builders originated in Atlantis. They then migrated east and west. Megalithic markers are still being discovered. They seem to form a network based on sophisticated measurements of the movements of the sun and moon. Markers found so far seem to follow lays, invisible power lines across the globe. Temples and monuments such as Stonehenge may have been built to harness or focus energy at the points where these lays intersect. According to explorer Zink, Bimini was a site of great magnetic power and alignment with the sun and stars. It was probably a central point in the Earth's power system. Isn't it likely that the discoverers or keepers of that system would live at one of its most powerful points? And Bimini, as we have said, is often associated with Atlantis. Modern scientists have wondered how primitive peoples were able to move the large stones into place. Mitchell suggests that the huge stones may have been moved by a kind of force that modern humans no longer know about. It may be that this force could be activated only when certain magnetic and gravitational conditions existed. John Mitchell believes that ancient people had a high level of knowledge concerning the elements of nature, and how to use those elements for energy, measuring and mathematical calculation. He says that this idea, however, is very difficult for some people to accept, because it means that ancient peoples may have had scientific knowledge equal or even superior to our own. The megaliths are a great mystery in themselves, but they may also be real evidence that a highly advanced culture such as Atlantis did indeed exist, thousands of years before our history began. Yes, I'm not so sure. But if you believe that, there you go. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you next time. See ya!